Hey there, welcome back. I'm Leslie Marshall. Thank you for joining us here on the only true democracy in talk, whichever way you get the program, live or streamed via podcast, watching, listening. We know you'll be learning, especially in this second half of this hour. Joining us is Jody Calemine. Jody is Director of Advocacy for the 63 unions and 15 million members of the AFL-CIO. And in his position, he serves as Chief Lobbyist and Director of Government Affairs for the AFL-CIO. He brings a wealth of experience and steadfast commitment to champion the needs of workers. The website for the AFL-CIO, AFLCIO.org. Their handle on Blue Sky is at AFLCIO.org. On Facebook, Instagram, and X, at AFL-CIO. And Jody's handle on Blue Sky is at guerino.bsky.social. That's guerino.bsky.social. Good to have you with us, Director Calemine. Thank you for joining us and welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
During the break, we're never supposed to, we always say, stays in Vegas, happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas. On TV, we say what is said in the green room stays in the green room. So we were in the green room in a sense, and we were just talking about, how are your holidays? And you said, it was good, to put the phone down. And I say that because in your position and in my position, there's a lot of stress when we see what's happening and the attack, the assault, if you will, on the middle class, on workers, on nearly an hourly basis coming from this administration. We've been through 1 year of the Trump administration, and now in the first year of his second term, and we look back and then we look at what's coming ahead of us down the pike. I think it's important to reflect, to look at a retrospect of the attacks on workers and how you guys at the AFL-CIO and the whole labor movement have fought back and what is coming next. Let's just take a look at this. During his first year in office, President Trump and his allies have been ruthlessly committed to turning the Project 2025 agenda into reality. Now, that's not Trump derangement syndrome. That is a fact. And they've done a lot. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the union busting. Is it fair to say the biggest single act of union busting in the history of unions is an executive order to end collective bargaining rights for most of the federal employees? Do we just start with that?
Yeah, you could. That's a very good place to start. You're exactly right. The single biggest act of union busting in American history, 1 million workers affected by this. That was this executive order that was signed back in March, very early in the administration. They went immediately after organized labor and the rights of workers. 1 million workers lost their right to bargain, and since then, a bunch of hundreds of thousands have been having their contracts canceled. That is signed agreements between these workers and their employer. Trump has decided to simply rip up as part of his union busting efforts within the federal sector. And that's just the federal sector. There's a whole lot of union busting sort of undercurrents in the private sector. At the same time, he in the first week of his in office, what he did was he fired Gwen Wilcox, one of the members of the National Labor Relations. And he did that because he said in the email that was sent to her, he said, "You are disfavoring the interests of employers. In other words, you're not ruling on cases the way I want you to, against workers and for the boss." So it was a clear signal to the remaining judges up and down the line at the NLRB that if you want to keep your job, you better rule the way Donald Trump wants you to rule. And that is against unions, against workers, and for the boss, destroying the independence of that agency for the time being while her case continues to pend.
And not just against all of what you've listed, it's against our Constitution. It's against the separate but equal branches of government. It's against the way the United States was set up to run, and the morality and ethics of this nation, or what should be the morality and ethics of this nation. Also, to your point, when you have that many people that lose their jobs, just let's look at in the government, in the federal government sector. It increases unemployment. It hurts the not only livelihood of those families, but then it's sort of like, well, what do they do if they can't pay their mortgage, right? They got to sell their houses. And then you have that deficit. You don't have enough people buying the real estate that's out there. And then what happens? The prices go up. In addition to that, then these people, a lot of them don't have health care. We've seen insurance premiums rise, and they will continue to rise, sadly, with the way things are going with this administration and the pushback from Republicans who are too fearful to stand up to this president. In addition to that, you have all the businesses that surround them that they were, part of that store that they purchased their coffee from on the corner, before they went to work. I mean, it's just a completely devastating rippling effect, a domino effect that goes beyond just those workers. And a lot of these workers are vital to our government. They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet that Doge wanted to cut in order to say, hey, look, we cut cost, but at what cost? Let's talk about another cost, and that is the brutal assault on immigrants and communities throughout this nation. The immigration crackdown doesn't protect American workers. It's a broader attack. It divides immigrants and US born workers, and that weakens solidarity in the labor movement, which is essential in the labor movement, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way because it's just another feature of the union buster in chief. This is an age-old tactic of the boss is to divide the workforce against itself, and it's clearly some of the most divisive, hateful rhetoric coming out of this administration is really designed to tear people apart, to tear at the social fabric of our country. And there's one thing, one lesson we've learned since the beginning of time, um, probably all the way back to the building of the pyramids. Workers are better off when they stand together and don't let the boss divide them. And labor's been very active on the immigration front over the last year. The AFL-CIO in particular has been working hard to get a lot of training out into the field for union members and union leaders, local union leaders, on know your rights type training, what to do during a raid, to know exactly how to handle encounters with ICE, how to stay safe, how to help de-escalate things. All of that work we've been doing very actively, prolifically around the country for months now to try and hold people together because we're all going to be worse off. These are immigrants are in the workforce. They are part of our labor movement. Many of us, practically the vast majority of us, descend just a few generations away from immigrants who came here to make a better life for themselves. They are part of our family, and we're going to stand with them.
And it doesn't just happen in Minnesota, specifically in Minneapolis, but you just see, hour after hour, you see business owners that say that they're tearing workers out of the my workforce, and they're citizens, or they're tearing workers out of my workforce and they have valid working papers. I here's a copy of the paper. So you're hurting more than that, just that person and that person's family who you're throwing in that, dark, black car and sending them to God knows where. You're hurting the workforce, you're hurting the morale of the people, and we're seeing more and more businesses, especially like Mexican restaurants, for example, just shutting their doors and saying, "Don't come to work today. We can't do it." You know what I mean? We're going to have to close down business. So,
Right.
really, this assault on, immigrants or people they perceive to be they are, immigrants, obviously, if they're not born here, but they assume they're not a citizen because of their skin color or their accent or what they're doing for a job. It's really, really hurting so many. Again, this rippling effect. Another thing, well, I touched upon healthcare, but we have nearly 20 million Americans that are having their healthcare ripped away. There's a whole other group of millions that are having their healthcare premiums rise, but then some people losing it altogether, 20 million plus, thanks to Trump's big, beautiful bill. Can you speak on that?
That's right. Healthcare is getting, right as of right now, getting dramatically more expensive for millions of people under the ACA, and then there are millions more who are slated to lose it from cutbacks in Medicaid and that sort of the public assistance in healthcare. The premiums on ACA insurance plans are skyrocketing this month. They've started skyrocketing for people, and that is resulting in either people spending an inordinate amount of money on their healthcare premiums, therefore not buying something else, not going on a vacation, not buying a new car, which has ripple effects throughout the economy, or dropping healthcare altogether. And we're seeing it especially in those states that did not expand Medicaid, where there's a lot more people relying on these ACA tax credits. There are hundreds of thousands of people, as we speak, who are dropping their healthcare plans. So they will go without health insurance, and that will have an impact on the economy in general. That will raise premiums for everybody else. So he promised to lower prices. He's raising healthcare prices. He promised to create jobs. As soon as he got in, that Elon Musk off to cut jobs. Hundreds of thousands of federal sector jobs.
Yeah, he's single-handedly destroying all the gains in the manufacturing center due to the infrastructure bill and the former administration under Joe Biden. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you and our guest right after this. We are back. The we are me, Leslie Marshall, and Director of Advocacy for the AFL-CIO, Jody Calemine. Director Calemine, thank you for holding, and welcome back. We're talking about what the Trump administration has done, and I want to touch upon a few more of those things before we get into the affordability promise or broken promise. The president in this administration specifically made billionaires richer. These are his buddies. These are his golfing buddies, his Mar-a-Lago party friends. That made corporations more powerful, all thanks to his policies shifting money and power upward. Does that embolden corporations and make it harder when you are trying to get a fair deal for workers?
Yes, sure. I mean, they know already that Donald Trump has his thumb on the scale at the NLRB. He's told them, you're going to get fired if you don't rule in favor of the corporations. That's why Gwen Wilcox was fired, because she was following her conscience and ruling on the facts and the law as she understood it as a judge. That wasn't appropriate for Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants the outcomes he wants. And so if you donate a big chunk of money to the golden ballroom that he's building, you might get a good outcome from one of the agencies where you have a case pending. That's clear. Like we live in it. We've walked that's right through the looking glass in terms of how the law is supposed to work in this country under this Trump regime. I've often joked, although it's a sad joke, to some of my colleagues in the labor law field, like we should perhaps start an exchange program with the Russian bar to understand how you present a case in a court that is going to be so slanted in favor of a White House that once it notices that there's a case pending and has some sort of material interest in, it may reach down in there and get the outcome it wants. So yes, it does embolden corporations, but corporations now are having to probably contribute a lot of money now in a variety of ways to ensure the outcomes they want from the administration at the same time.
Yeah, very, very true. I want to talk briefly about AI. They have moved to unleash untested AI technology. They're fast tracking government adoption of this technology before clearing standards, testing, oversight frameworks in place. They rolled back AI guardrails. That empowers private firms. It gives them broad influence over how AI is used, where AI is used. And the president has falsely framed this as solely a national security issue to justify the rapid rollout. But again, we have technologies remaining untested and dangerous, not to mention how many jobs it will take away from human beings.
Yeah, Donald Trump tends to frame everything as a national security issue because that's where he thinks he has all his power. I mean, he's framed whether or not a janitor has a union contract at a VA hospital as a matter of national security. So I wouldn't listen to him when he brings up national security all the time the way he does. But yeah, the great threat that we're dealing with right now and have been fending off in Congress repeatedly has been a push from this administration and from big tech to not only not regulate AI at a federal level, but to prevent states and cities from regulating AI on a local level. In other words, they want to preempt any attempt to enforce any rules that a state might adopt to protect people from harmful artificial intelligence, whether it's to protect consumers or children or workers. They don't want any regulation of this stuff. They want it to be the Wild West.
And it will be. It kind of, it's funny you say that. Did you ever hear of or watch a show called Westworld? I think it was on HBO. And it was a movie many years ago with Yul Brynner. That's what it reminds me of. It walks like it's a robot, looks like a person. But I don't know about you, but if I have a surgeon operating, I want a human. I don't want a robot. I don't want humans having a more difficult time getting jobs because robots are taking them. We have enough of that. Moving on to the affordability. President Trump promised to make America affordable again, even though he says affordability is something Democrats made up, right? It's this made up term. It's a hoax. But instead, he spent the last year, his first year of his second term, driving up cost, holding down wages, letting jobs disappear, but that also includes jobs that would keep energy bills from skyrocketing, which they are. Can you speak to that? It's not just
Yes.
jobs, it's where these jobs are. And again, the rippling domino effect that it has on other sectors. In this particular instance that we're talking about, energy bills.
Basic economics. If you want to lower the price on electricity, for example, an important way to do that is to increase the supply of electricity. And before Trump took office, this country was on its way to really building a whole lot of clean energy projects across the country, whether it was wind or solar or some like newfangled things that I don't even understand around hydrogen. All of these clean energy projects were paused by Donald Trump. Now that immediately uh, causes a bunch of corporations to pull back on their investments in this area. That leads to job loss. So we've lost a lot of construction job opportunities all across this country from this. At the same time, we are not expanding our electricity supply. At the very moment AI and other technologies are demanding more electricity in our system, we are decreasing the supply, and that is literally driving electricity prices up through the roof for everyday Americans. That's just electricity. You can look at food. Things like coffee is way up, milk is up, rent is up. It goes on and on. These prices and people's wages are not keeping up with it. The prices are going up. What we need are increased wages. And yet all the union busting that Donald Trump is engaging in and his thumb on the scale of labor justice means it's harder for workers to exercise their full bargaining power in the marketplace. So all of these promises are broken promises from the president.
Absolutely. But in the face of all these attacks on workers, on their conditions, their jobs, their wages, their freedoms, their livelihoods, more and more workers are turning to unions because they know they can't fight the corporation, the administration, the greed without the help of unions. So it's kind of backfiring, isn't it? The union busting in a sense for Donald Trump because these workers are turning to unions in fields that we've never seen unionized before, which is amazing. It's awesome. They're workers in all these different, areas and all these different areas of the private sector turning to unions to fight back. But also, you guys are winning. It takes some time, but you're winning.
Yes, yes. The organizing is robust. There's an old adage in the labor movement that the best organizer is a bad boss. And people are looking for mutual aid and protection, which is what a labor union is. In this time of uncertainty and fear and the economy, unclear which way the economy is headed, people are looking for some security, something to stand on. We are one of the most trusted institutions in this country. We have high favorability ratings. People are pulling together to form and join these unions in order to take some agency over their lives and all this uncertainty. That's one of the big things that's happening right now is a whole lot of organizing.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, at the end of the year in December, we saw the first sprouts of victory. There was a bipartisan group of lawmakers that canceled votes on the SCORE Act, and they succumbed to pressure after months of organizing from the labor movement. Tell us about the SCORE Act and that victory.
Well, the SCORE Act is a bill pressed by the NCAA and a bunch of power conferences that has to do with college athletes' rights. One of the provisions in it, there's a bunch of bad provisions in it, but one of the provisions in it was designed explicitly to ensure that college athletes are never considered employees, never have any right to collectively bargain, would have no rights at all as workers. And a university could treat a college athlete however it wants to treat that college athlete, and it will never, ever, that athlete will never be considered an employee. So we viewed it as an attack on labor rights. If it starts there, where will it end? Who else will be deemed never an employee, and the employer can do whatever it wants to that person? So we stood our ground on that, and ultimately the bill was unable to gather enough votes to make it to the House floor. But I have to say that the labor movement, organized labor, has been leading the way in terms of ending Trump's stranglehold on this Congress, in terms of finding the cracks in the wall and building a working bipartisan majority on some basic bread and butter issues. That's an example of it. Most recently, the Protect America's Workforce Act, which would restore collective bargaining rights across the federal sector. We were able to use a discharge petition and override Speaker Johnson's objections to even seeing that bill on the floor, to get it to the floor and actually pass it with every Democrat voting yes, plus about 20 Republicans voting yes. And then last week, the Republican leadership had an idea to nickel and dime workers by rolling back some of their overtime pay, or how tipped workers might receive pay. All little ways to just pull a little money back from working people and hand it to the boss. The first of those bills went up and was defeated with all Democrats voting no, plus 6 Republicans voting no, and they saw the writing on the wall and pulled the rest of those bills. So a week that was slated to be a bunch of decimation of workers' wages, one bill after another, turned out they batted exactly 0 last week on that agenda. So we've been able to cobble together, in the House at least, a working bipartisan majority to try and push back on the worst aspects of Project 2025. The Senate is a tougher nut to crack.
Well, in the House, you guys are doing good. You have bipartisan, House group that rallied around the extension of the ACA tax credits. I know there's more to come in the fight for working people in 2026. We so thank you for taking the time to be with us, Director Calemine. Jody Calemine, Director of Advocacy for the AFL-CIO. Once again, check out the website, aflcio.org. Their handle on Blue Sky, follow them there at aflcio.org. Their handle on Facebook, Instagram, and X is at AFL-CIO. And Director Calemine, Jody's handle on Blue Sky is at guerino.bsky.social. That's at guerino.bsky.social. I'm Leslie Marshall. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep fighting, because you will win. It will take time, but you see what they're doing at AFL-CIO. They fight, they win. You can do it too. And this is why you need a union to protect you.